Have we mentioned the president of the United States is a teeny bit corrupt? And there's also, of course, a cover up going on. That's after the obstruction of justice. There's a whole lot of impeachment ahead of us. Yesterday, as we mentioned, President Biden was asked specifically by a reporter whether he was sitting next to his son when that whole shakedown for $5 million took place. Here's the president's very reasonable and not at all defensive or guilty reaction.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't, and I don't know.
Were you?
No.
Yikes. Okay, Gramps, take it easy. We're going to stop asking you about all those millions of dollars you got from China. And that's the point. Regardless of whether he was sitting next to his son or not, just a few days later, yes, $5 million showed up in one of Hunter Biden's multiple shell corporations, and it came from the Chinese. So, what did they buy for that money? Let's bring in Gordon Chang. You can follow him on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang, and he's the author of The Coming Collapse of China. I mean, Gordon, that's what this is really all about, isn't it? What were the Chinese buying with the Biden family?
I think they were buying access, Larry. We know from the academic Di Chang, who gave that famous lecture in November of 2020, right after our general election. And he was talking about how the Chinese regime was looking forward to reestablishing its contacts with the Oval Office that had been broken during the Trump administration. And then Di said that the Chinese could determine outcomes at the highest levels of the Chinese political system. No American could resist what China wanted, and that every American could be bought. And by the way, the biggest laugh that Dee got during this live stream lecture was when he said two words: Hunter Biden.
Wow. I mean, and you don't hear that in the media as they're ignoring this story, but you would think that that would be rather relevant. And speaking of Hunter Biden, another WhatsApp text message to his handlers in China had been revealed. And this language is incredibly curious. He said, and I'm quoting now, the Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. Chairman is capitalized, by the way. And of course, I'm guessing that doesn't mean the chairman of some corporation. He's talking about Xi Jinping, isn't he?
Indirectly, I'm sure he is, because remember that whether a company is private or state, civilian or military, they're all one in China because it's a communist totalitarian system these days. And that means that Xi Jinping can call up the head of CEFC or any Chinese company doing business with the Bidens and tell them what Biden should do. So clearly, Hunter Biden was saying, we're going to take our orders. And he had to know the context of that.
Gordon, yesterday in his speech in Chicago about Bidenomics, President Biden sort of went off script, and he was bragging about the fact that he's met with Xi Jinping privately over 68 times, more than 68 hours. Nobody on the planet knows Xi Jinping better than he does. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best testimony for him to give, considering what we're learning about his family's relationship with China. What message, when he says that during the context of a presidential address, how is that received in Beijing?
Oh, I'm sure the Chinese are just laughing, that there is this sense among Americans, not just Biden, that, if we can only talk to them, that we can get them to see things our way. And unfortunately, when you look at the history of what's happened during the Biden administration, we have been doing things that have been making China more belligerent. So, for instance, after the spy balloon, the State Department, according to Reuters, postponed actions it had planned to take against China. And so China got a twofer. It got to surveil our nuclear weapon sites, but it also got the State Department to back down. And we think that this is going to sort of make China more amenable. But what it's really doing is giving the incentives to act even more provocatively. So, and that's what we have seen. We have seen turbulence during the Biden era that we did not see during the Trump years.
Gordon, I remember very early on in the Biden administration, the president did, he reversed a policy during the Trump administration that kept Chinese nationals and specifically people with links to the Chinese government to have presence on American college campuses. Biden reversed that almost immediately when he took office. What was that all about? Why was that a red flag for you?
Well, and it was not only that, it was just hours after taking the oath of office, Biden issued an executive order that reversed the Trump one. The Trump order prohibited the importation into the United States of electrical grid equipment from China. So we saw, a series of actions that Biden took which were inexplicable. One could say that of course, every president wants to review the China policy of his predecessor, but you need to keep protections in place. And we saw this throughout Biden's actions of not protecting America. And this really is dangerous because I think it gave the Chinese the sense that they could do whatever they wanted, like that academic in Shanghai was talking about. So I think the Chinese actually believe that they can get Biden pretty much to do what they want when they really want him to do something.
By the way, this all of this news that we're learning about the Biden family's connections and all of that money that was flowing in from China to the Biden family shell corporations, this comes just within days of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence revealing Friday, without anyone noticing, that yeah, the research and an investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 virus that killed millions around the world does in fact lead directly to that lab in Wuhan. China's been lying to us from day one about it. They still haven't been transparent or allowed World Health officials to come and inspect that plant in any meaningful way. I mean, and Biden administration has pretty much said nothing about it. They want it to go away. They want to ignore the pandemic, Gordon, and China's hands are all over it.
Yeah. In Biden's conversations with Xi Jinping, both in person and phone, he has never once raised the issues of the origins of COVID-19. Biden has had one in-person meeting and I think 6 or 7 video calls or phone calls. Also, Biden did sign the COVID Origins Act in March, but that was supposed to lead to the declassification of the underlying intelligence. And the director of national intelligence on Friday just issued a summary report. That doesn't meet the requirements of the statute. And so really what you've got to be concerned is that the Biden administration is trying to protect the Communist Party in something that has killed, according to Johns Hopkins, more than 1.1 million Americans and almost 7 million people worldwide, which I believe the 7 million figure is underestimated.
Yeah. By the way, they missed the deadline that law dictated in terms of releasing at least this preliminary report because they didn't want Anthony Blinken to have to deal with it when he was visiting Beijing. Again, cowardly stance against our adversaries over there in China. And one other thing, Gordon, when we talk about how the Biden administration's policies have changed, maybe as a direct result of all of those millions of dollars. You've recently written an article over at the Gatstone Institute with regard to what you're calling China's saboteurs who are crossing our border illegally down in Mexico. Tell me about this.
Yeah, we are seeing packs of Chinese males of military age, unattached to family groups, pretending not to speak English, coming into our country. Chairman Mark Green, chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, said that he actually talked to a border protection sector chief who said that some of these Chinese males have known affiliations to the People's Liberation Army. There's other evidence that these are saboteurs coming into our country. Biden administration is releasing them into the United States, and as far as we know, is not tracking them. And really, what we've got here is a big cadre of saboteurs spread throughout the United States, probably linking up with sleeper agents in the Chinese consulate. There is really disturbing evidence that these are not who they say they are. And one other thing, Larry, we are seeing a surge, an unprecedented surge of Chinese migrants into our country, indicating that China itself is in distress, which means that Xi Jinping, who we just talked about, he probably has incentives to rally the Chinese people with a war. And so we are at the doorstep of one, as Henry Kissinger said. Henry Kissinger said, war between China and the United States is, quote unquote, probable.
Yeah, you make a good point. If the Chinese economy is so strong and we're sending all of our things to be manufactured over there, why on earth would migrant workers from China have to make the around the world trek to come to Mexico to cross into our country? Gordon Chang, sobering stuff as always. Thank you for joining us. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.